Recorded at an undisclosed location known only as the Homestead. You've tuned into Ever Vigilant. Our mission? To encourage and challenge men to prepare, defend, and lead at home and in their communities.
Several years ago, I came across a picture that literally altered my life completely from the moment I saw it on. It changed the way I look at this world. It changed the way I look at my children. It changed the way I look at my responsibilities as a man and as a father and as a husband. In fact, for years, I kept that picture on my phone to go back to whenever I needed to push myself and to make goals and to keep myself going in the direction that I needed to go in. This picture, I have no idea where it came from. I have no idea why I came upon it or where I saw it. But this picture was maybe from Syria, some other war-torn country, and you see bombed buildings, no doors on the buildings, no glass in the windows, roofs caved in. Looks like something out of a movie. If that wasn't life-altering enough, what really changed things for me was the father and his carrying his young daughter in that picture. Because I realized when I saw the look in that father's eyes, the look of concern, the look of love, the look of needing to continue moving forward, and the look of desperation and fear in his daughter's eyes, as a young father had a huge impact on me. Because at that moment I realized I am responsible. It is my responsibility to take care of my children. It is my responsibility to take care of my wife. It is my responsibility to take care of those whom I am in charge of. And because of that, started a new focus and a new direction for me to learn about preparedness, to learn about what it takes to get prepared for different types of disasters, and to begin to prepare myself for the unthinkable. And whether that might be just a time off of work and extra food and storage comes in a great benefit, or whether it be that there's a flood in an area, or a bad snowstorm that keeps you snowed in for 3 or 4 days, to maybe bad water in your area where you're under restriction and can't drink that water. So having the correct filters or water in storage can be of a great benefit, especially if there's a run on food and supplies at the grocery store. So at that moment, when I saw that picture for the first time, I realized that I needed to change my path. I needed to change the way I viewed the world. I needed to change the way I viewed my responsibility. And I did. My name's Joe Prim. I am the host of this podcast, Ever Vigilant. And my goal with this podcast is equip men to prepare, defend, and lead at home and in their communities. For me, prepare is at the top of that list. Prepare is mentioned first because if you are not prepared, how are you going to defend and how are you going to lead? Now, preparedness doesn't always just mean stocking up food or respirators or bullets, beans, and bandages. There's a lot of other things to preparing. But in this episode, I wanted to talk about this coronavirus and get a little bit deeper into our responsibility as men, our responsibility to our communities, to our wives, and to our children, and to those around us that are relying on us when the chips are down. The more I started to look at the coronavirus, the more I started to look at the numbers and look at the countries, how statistics were being added up, the more it became very obvious that nobody has a true grasp on what's going on. And if they really do have a true grasp on exactly what's going on, they probably don't have the intention of letting everybody know. Because the reality in a country like maybe the United States or Australia or Canada, and I have listeners all over the world, so I don't want to make this only U.S. specific. But because of that, of these areas that are further away from the East, I think that there's a real fear that panic, or the panic caused by a pandemic or by this virus, could potentially be much worse than the virus itself. So there's a delicate balancing act going on in these countries, in the governments, in the health administrations, of what's the balance of giving correct information and where's the balance of not creating panic. So at this moment that I'm recording this, there's like 59 or 60 countries that have reported cases. And where you really start to see that things are questionable is in countries like Thailand, where the numbers don't quite add up. They're not really relatable to South Korea or to Japan or other countries in that area. Their numbers seem very, very low. But then if you go to look at their numbers of what they're recording just for flu virus this year, those numbers are way up. So we know that there's countries that are reporting this differently, or there are countries that are changing the name or changing the description in order to make the numbers look lower. Then we have countries like Italy that the numbers look like they were skyrocketing, that said that they're going to change the way that they report the people that do or potentially do have the virus. So by changing those numbers, by changing the name, they can make the numbers look lower than they really are in order to maybe avoid panic. But then there's other countries like Japan that is closing schools. Disney Resort in Tokyo is closed. Universal Studios in Tokyo is closed. The Tokyo Marathon was canceled. I think it was just this weekend. So there are countries that are taking pretty extreme measures in order to try to curb public gatherings where this virus could get spread. I think it's also very difficult to believe the numbers coming out of China, because there are estimates that a full 20% of their population is under quarantine, and the quarantine there is not like we would do a quarantine here in the United States or in most Western countries, where those people are separated but still under evaluation. In China right now, a lot of the quarantining that's going on is completely shutting down villages, blocking off roads, barricading apartment complexes to keep people trapped inside, where they really can't be monitored as far as how they are faring, whether they recovered from the virus and then got it again, whether they have completely recovered from the virus. There's not a lot of monitoring going on. I think in a lot of countries in the West, the United States, other Western countries, where the real difficulties are going to come from is from the lack of goods coming out of China. And this is where there might be, or there's possibly, a much bigger chance of difficulties in getting goods. A lot of prescription drugs come out of Asia. There are a lot of household goods that come out of Asia that we count on, not even including the technology built there in the factories, that comes out of there that we are probably not ready to deal without. So the bigger threat in many countries very well could be the economic toll that this virus is causing, especially in China. China at this time now looks like they're trying to get people back into the factories because they realize what this kind of economic collapse could do to their country without their country producing the goods that are being sold around the world. But many of the people that work in those factories had gone back home to their villages for the Chinese New Year. The Chinese New Year each year is the biggest mass migration of people in the world. So the majority of people, they leave areas where there's factories, they go back home to their rural villages to celebrate the new year with their friends and family. And when they were back home celebrating the new year, this quarantine came into play. So not only did you have the people that maybe were infected by the virus go off to their distant homes and potentially spread the virus into rural areas, but those people that are in those rural areas are much less likely to want to return to those cities where the factories are located, even if the government in China wants these people to go back to work. If you had your choice of staying at home in a rural area versus going back to the city to go back to work in a factory, most of us would choose staying where we're at. So that's kind of the dilemma of why it's even going to be difficult to get things ramped back up again, not to mention the reality of this virus. Most of these potential pandemics can have 2 or 3 waves. Most are saying that this is just the first wave. So this is going to be really a place by place, a location by location thing that you are going to have to monitor. If you live in some place like LA or maybe Miami, where there's a lot of international traffic coming in, both by sea and by air, you probably need to take different precautions than somebody that lives in a rural area in Wisconsin. So region by region, it will be up to you, and you will need to pay attention to what the threat indicators are and how things look in your area. But again, above and beyond fears of this virus, that does appear to be 15 to 20 times more lethal than the normal flu. But again, it's very hard to get a true grasp on those numbers because of the countries that they're coming out of. Those numbers are being skewed to protect against panic, against panic buying, against panic selling off in the stock market. In order to prepare for this, I think that we need to prepare basically just as if you were preparing for anything else. The CDC and DHS suggest keeping at least 2 weeks of food at your home. That way, if there's an earthquake, a bad snowstorm, the electric goes out, or there is even a quarantine, or you decide to quarantine yourself in your home for 2 weeks, you have that option. 2 weeks worth of food could maybe get spread out into 3 weeks. Because this is a flu, and people could be getting sick, there's potential for fevers, so fever-reducing medicines. Water is always important. Electrolyte packets that you can add into your regular water, or whether that be Gatorade. A lot of different options out there for electrolytes. That would be something that you might want to add. A thermometer, so you can keep track of whether somebody in your family or those that you're responsible for have a fever or not. Masks are another thing. So people know the surgical masks, those are intended to keep from breathing onto others. They're also a good reminder to keep your hands off of your face. But if there's fear of breathing in the virus, you need the N95 masks, which are basically like a regular construction dust mask. But those will help you from breathing in. Don't think you need to go out and buy out Home Depot, like I saw some people doing the other day when I was there. But it's to have on hand as a precaution. You should have them. They should be a part of your preps anyway, because if there is an earthquake or a tornado or something like that, you may be involved in a cleanup effort, or a flood where there is potential for mold, where you could be involved in a cleanup effort or rescuing things out of your home. And you would want those masks anyway, those N95 dust masks, in order to protect your lungs in those situations from the dust. Bleach, Lysol, plastic and duct tape can be used if you had people come to your home, maybe neighbors, maybe your kid comes home from school, or maybe you come home for work, you're not feeling well. You could always quarantine yourself and plastic off a bedroom door and duct tape it off. Those things give you extra options. It's always good to have plastic, always good to have duct tape around anyway as part of your preps to have around the house for keeping things clean, for keeping dust out of areas, and duct tape for repairing everything, right? I went to Home Depot with my daughter just to pick up a couple gallons of bleach and some Lysol. And as we were driving, what I reminded her of is that we will be prepared, not scared. Rather than having your family, those that you're responsible for, being freaked out, worried, paranoid about these things, when you have taken your responsibility as the head of the household, you have taken your responsibility seriously as a father and as a husband and as a leader to be prepared. You bring confidence. You take away the fear. You take away the paranoia from those that you are leading because they see that you are taking responsibility. They see that there will be food if they couldn't leave their house. They see that there would be water if they couldn't leave their house. They see that you are making an attempt to make life easier should things get more difficult. And as a father and as a husband, bringing that confidence, bringing that security, and bringing that leadership into your role, into your responsibility is really what it's all about. You want to put yourself in the position to best take care of those that you are responsible for. Thank you for listening to this episode. My mission with this podcast is to equip you to prepare, defend, and lead at home and in your communities. One way that I do that is with this podcast. You can go to vigilantwolf.com and get access to the full archives of this podcast. Also, articles written by past guests to this podcast, Scott Smith from Banished from Eden, Paul Kurtman from paulkurtman.com. These guys are writing great articles that will equip you to be a better husband, a better father, and a better leader. Another way vigilantwolf.com can equip you is with gear, selling holsters, belts, first aid and trauma kits there, and there's a placeholder for events. You can also from there become a member of the Wolf Pack. The Wolf Pack are the men that support this podcast. You can become a member of the Wolf Pack by going to patreon.com/evervigilant. Thanks for listening, and as always, hold fast and God bless.
For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.